Welcome. This series of 5 webinars was developed to educate families about recent updates to annotated evaluation and reevaluation report forms. While the law has not changed, changes were made to the annotated report forms in early 2016. Annotated forms are designed to provide notes for better understanding of each section of the forms. Where can you find the handouts that accompany this presentation? On PEO's website and on the patent website. On many slides, you will find a folder icon in the upper right-hand corner, which tells you which handouts support the information on that slide. This is Part 1, which focuses on the federal and state special education laws related to evaluation and reevaluation. The contents of this webinar series were developed and organized by the Evaluation Workgroup. PEO was charged with bringing together a group of cross-disability organizations from across Pennsylvania to form this workgroup. Pennsylvania Department of Education, Bureau of Special Education, provide funding for the PEO Center to facilitate the evaluation workgroup and to develop training for families about the annotated evaluation and reevaluation forms. The workgroup includes representatives from statewide family organizations, including Mission Empower, the Autism Connection of Pennsylvania, Disability Rights Pennsylvania, Temple University Institute on Disability, Autism Sharing and Parenting, PEAK, the Pennsylvania Education for All Coalition, the Pennsylvania branch of the International Dyslexia Association, the Parent Education and Advocacy Leadership Center, and many other family perspectives. We have divided the content into 5 parts of 15 to 30 minutes each. We recommend that the viewer watch the parts in order as the information builds from one to the next. The 5 parts of the series are listed on this slide. As you can see, Part 1, which is highlighted, focuses on federal and Pennsylvania special education law. Core vocabulary in this part includes evaluation and reevaluation. These are the processes for gathering data to determine if a child needs special education and, if so, the types of programs and services needed. IDEA is federal special education law, and Chapter 14 is Pennsylvania regulations governing special education. Viewing them side by side allows you to see what Pennsylvania regulations contain that are in addition to the IDEA requirements. In this section, the core vocabulary includes the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, or IDEA. This is the federal law ensuring services to children with disabilities throughout the nation. IDEA governs how states and public agencies provide early intervention, special education, and related services to more than 6.5 million eligible infants, toddlers, children, and youth with disabilities. It is important to remember that IDEA is an entitlement program. This means that the school districts cannot use "we cannot afford it" or "we don't have the money" as a reason for not providing services. Education is an entitlement to children who are eligible under IDEA. The evaluation process gathers the information that will be used to determine if your child needs special education, and if so, the types of programs and services needed. Chapter 14 is Pennsylvania's state regulation to implement the federal legislation, IDEA. In the upper right-hand corner of this slide, you can see the folder icon. This is a reference to the side-by-side document. You can learn more about this topic by looking at that handout. Understanding how federal and state laws form the basis for evaluation and reevaluation will help the parent through the evaluation process. When a student is being evaluated in school, these laws and regulations provide the process for determining whether or not the student is eligible for special education and developing an appropriate individualized education program, or IEP, to meet those needs. As a result of this presentation, we hope you will be able to define how students are found eligible for special education as a result of the evaluation and reevaluation processes, give examples of IDEA category disabilities, and define specially designed instruction and related services. This slide includes many tenets or key ideas from IDEA, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. Read the slide to identify a tenet of the law that you find most meaningful. Note which phrase you find most meaningful and why it's meaningful to you.
Disability is a natural part of the human experience and in no way diminishes the right of the individual to participate in or contribute to society.
People who selected number 1 often mention that disability affects everyone at some point in their lives and is an overarching reminder.
Parents should be informed decision makers.
This tenet speaks to the importance of parents on an IEP team and that they are equal partners. The school has a responsibility to provide parents with the information needed to make an informed decision.
Children with disabilities must be educated with their non-disabled peers in the least restrictive environment, LRE, to the maximum extent appropriate. Special education is a service and not a place.
Number 3 addresses the importance of inclusion and that the law provides a strong basis for advocating for inclusion, even if the word itself is not in the law.
Multidisciplinary evaluation must be completed to ensure a full view of the disability.
Number 4 reminds us that the evaluation is based on a suspected disability, but that it must be confirmed by looking at the whole realm of possible needs as well as strengths. An individualized education program is a plan or program developed to ensure that an eligible child who has a disability identified under the law and is attending a public elementary or secondary school receives specialized instruction and related services. Least restrictive environment, referred to as LRE, is a continuum and a reminder that special education is a service and not a place. Students are to be educated with typical peers to the maximum extent appropriate. Students receive all the supports and services they need to be successful in the general education classroom. They do not have to go to another classroom or place to receive special education services. Supplementary aids and services means aids, services, and other supports that are provided in regular education classes and other education-related settings, and in extracurricular and non-academic settings to enable children with disabilities to be educated with non-disabled peers to the maximum extent appropriate. Multidisciplinary evaluation, referred to as MDE, is a process to gather information to determine if a child has a disability and needs special education, and if so, the types of services needed. It is typically performed by more than one individual and uses a variety of tools to help determine eligibility for special education. Note again the icon at the top right-hand corner of the slide where you can find additional supplementary resources. You may wish to review them independently to learn more about this topic.
Both IDEA and Chapter 14 require that the evaluation for special education determines whether or not a student meets two requirements. This is often referred to as a two-pronged test of eligibility. The evaluation team must agree that the student has one of the IDEA category disabilities and that as a result the student needs specially designed instruction and/or related services. So let's explore some real examples. A child is being evaluated for special education, but the decision depends upon whether the student meets the definition for one of the IDEA category disabilities and whether they need specially designed instruction and related services. In one example, the team may determine that the child meets the definition for other health impairment or autism or specific learning disabilities and is experiencing complex instructional challenges in some classes which requires specially designed instruction. This student meets both prongs.
In contrast, a student may need health-related supports due to their disability, but does not need specially designed instruction. So the student does not qualify for special education because they only meet one prong.
The point here is there are a lot of "it depends" situations. Often, the determinations are complex, which is why the child needs to be evaluated. If you need individualized support in thinking about your child's individual situation, you could contact your local school district, and you might want to ask your teacher who should you talk to. You can go to PEAL or any of the evaluation workgroup participants who are listed on the last slide for their contact information. Some core vocabulary on this slide: specially designed instruction, which is changes, adaptations, accommodations needed for the student to access the general education curriculum. This is what will make this child successful in school. This slide lists all the IDEA category disabilities. There are definitions of the 13 disability categories, and federal definitions guide how states define who is eligible for a free, appropriate public education under IDEA. As we explain later, if you suspect that your child has a disability, you have the right to request an evaluation. You don't have to have a medical diagnosis from a doctor to be evaluated. The parent does not have to have a specific disability category in mind. It is the evaluation team's role to assess the strengths and the needs and determine what, if any, disability category the student fits into. Sometimes a student has a disability, like dyslexia, that is not specifically listed in IDEA. However, the child can still qualify for special education. For example, a child with dyslexia may qualify as having a specific learning disability, or a child with ADHD may qualify under the category of other health impairment. Once the evaluation team has identified if the student has an IDEA category disability, the other question that the evaluation must answer is, does the student need specially designed instruction and related services as a result of the disability? This slide provides the defining characteristics of specially designed instruction. It consists of unique supports for the student, and the purpose of providing SDI is to remove barriers and ensure access to the general education curriculum. Some core vocabulary on this slide is specially designed instruction, SDI. This is the unique set of supports provided to an individual student based on his or her learning needs to remove barriers that result from the student's disability. SDI is used to address the unique needs of the child that result from the child's disability and to ensure access to the general education curriculum so that the student can meet the educational standards. Specially designed instruction means adapting as appropriate to the needs of the eligible child, the content, the methodology, or delivery of instruction. SDI may involve any aspect of the student's instruction, including materials, techniques, assessments, and activities. Specially designed instruction, or SDI, can be adapting or modifying what is taught, how it is taught, and the ways in which learning is assessed. It can address one or all of these variables. We have included examples of specially designed instruction on this slide, such as providing visual supports, use of a laptop or screen reading software, and providing choices or wait time. As you can see, SDI encompasses a wide variety of potential strategies. In addition to specially designed instruction, related services are also part of special education. The IDEA definition of related services describes them as developmental, corrective, and other supportive services as are required to assist a child with a disability to benefit from special education. IDEA includes a lengthy list of related services. Examples of related services we see on this slide include psychological counseling, physical therapy, speech therapy, occupational therapy, and transportation. Supplementary aids and services is another framework for thinking about special education supports and services. Supplementary aids and services means aids, services, and other supports that are provided in general education classes, other educational related settings, and in extracurricular and non-academic settings to enable children with disabilities to be educated with non-disabled children to the maximum extent appropriate. The purpose of providing supplementary aids and services is to support students with disabilities as active participants with non-disabled peers, as well as to enable their access to the general education curriculum. At the top right hand of your screen, the Supplementary Aids and Services fact sheet, which is a supplementary handout that describes and provides examples. Some core vocabulary on this slide. Transportation is a related service. Transportation includes travel to and from school and in between schools, travel in and around school buildings, and specialized equipment such as special or adapted buses, lifts, and ramps, if required to provide special transportation for a child with a disability. Psychological counseling is a related service that is required to be provided when a student demonstrates a need for this type of support. It can also be provided to families of the student. You have completed part 1 of this series. We recommend that the viewer watch the parts in order as the information builds from one to the next. Part 2 focuses on the permission to evaluate form. Let's review the key points to remember from Part 1. Families have the right to ask that the school conduct an evaluation for special education services, per federal and state regulations. In order to be eligible, a student must meet criteria for IDEA category disability and be in need for specially designed instruction and related services. Specially designed instruction should remove barriers and allow access to general education curriculum. It can include adapting or modifying any aspect of instruction. Related services are supportive services that assist a child to benefit from special education.
Thank you for joining us for this part of the Evaluation and Reevaluation presentation series. We hope you found the information valuable and informative. If you need individualized support for thinking about your child's situation, you can contact any of the evaluation workgroup partners, your local school district, your local task force on the right to education, or Patton. A list of the partners and their contact information is included in a separate handout. Refer to the folder icon in the upper right-hand corner of the slide.